There are many options if you're looking for a family SUV with seating for 7 or 8, but none quite as good as the Toyota Highlander and the Hyundai Palisade. However, there is a problem. Each of these, as tested, tops 50 grand. So let's take them out and see if they're worth it. Now, age before beauty means that the Toyota Highlander goes first, and though it's been around for over 2 decades, that means that, well, Toyota knows what their buyers want, and for example, in this application, it's economy, which is why this Highlander hybrid gets 36 mpg combined, and that's a staggering figure. The Toyota may have over 2 decades experience, but the Hyundai has been around the block as well. Okay, so while this Palisade may be in its first generation and may have only debuted in 2018, Hyundai isn't new to creating 3-row family SUVs. They've had the Veracruz that was in production for a couple years, and then they've made the Santa Fe XL up until, well, 2018 when they introduced the Palisade. So when they brought the Palisade, they really brought it. So while the Hyundai may technically be the new kid on the block, it's been around for a bit. But let's talk about behind the wheel feel, and for that we have to keep in mind what this thing is. Now, this is the hybrid, so it gets 243 roaring horsepower from a 4-cylinder 2.5-liter displacement engine with 2 electric motors. Now, those numbers aren't what you would consider supercar or sports car, but that's not what this is. And the fact of the matter is, the electric torque comes on instantly, so this thing actually feels a lot punchier than you would expect. Another nice thing is the fact that, yeah, this is a 2.5 liter and it is a 4-cylinder, and granted it's not going to make the best noise, but it does make kind of an interesting noise, and for that, I have to thank it. It makes kind of a Wookiee sound. I'll take character over power in something like this any day. Now, dynamically, this is still a big family SUV. It's still got 3 rows, and you're kind of not going to escape that effort. But what I will say is that the driving position is fantastic, and the visibility forward and to the sides is immaculate. It's a huge piece of glass up front. The visibility out the sides is very good, skinny A-pillars. The only issue I have is that the back window is a little bit small. However, when you talk about controlling the vehicle and placing it on the road, it's very easy to do so. You've got your blind spot monitoring and a whole bunch of safety stuff, and the vehicle does respond really, really well to your inputs. This is, of course, built on a unibody architecture, so it drives more like a car. The steering feels a lot more responsive, and the braking is very good as well. The dampers, while a little bit stiff and a little bit bumpy for something like this, do a pretty good job. While the Highlander focuses on comfort and efficiency, the Palisade gives you a little more fizz. And that's a result of the bigger 3.8-liter naturally aspirated V6 engine. Makes 291 horsepower, and that's almost 50 more horsepower than the Highlander. And you notice. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Matt, okay, well, it's a bigger engine, it's naturally aspirated, that means it's going to get less fuel economy. And you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm not going to argue with that. This gets 26 mpg, so that's a good 10 mpg less than the Highlander, and that's on the highway. Now, this 3.8 V6 does run on an Atkinson cycle, so it's not like it doesn't make an attempt to be efficient. However, that's really not where this Palisade shines. And for that, I have to reference the initial press trip to Idaho and Coeur d'Alene when Hyundai flew me out and had an absolute blast driving this through the mountains. And that's because the way that this thing handles, for its size, for what it is incredible. There's an incredible sense of neutrality in the corners. The chassis is so well balanced. It just rotates with the wheel. You can rotate with throttle. It's very, very rewarding to drive for a family SUV with 3 rows. So the Palisade does fuel economy worse, comfort about the same, if not a little bit better, and driving fun towers above the Highlander. But that's not the most important thing on vehicles like these. However, the most important thing on something like a family SUV is what's going on the inside. And now, this being the limited trim, you get the gussied up interior. You've got the 2-tone kind of tan and chocolate interior with the contrasted stitching, and it's all really pretty nice. You've got leather wrapped everything, big inputs and controls, very easy to navigate. You've got loads of charging outlets, and The only downfall is, I'll say, that Toyota's never really been a pioneer of technology, but you have a massive screen, the processing power is great, it's responsive, and it does what you want it to. And let's be honest, if you're driving this thing, you're just going to use Apple CarPlay and Android Auto anyway. There is one little gimmick though that I think is kind of nice. You have a PA feature, so you can speak to people in the third row without having to turn and shout. The Toyota is quite nice, but the Palisade we have is the calligraphy trim, and it's about as fancy as you can get. Now the interior on the Palisade is quite a bit more formal, with the brushed aluminum and the quilted leather, and on some trims you get real wood inserts. I mean, it's fair enough to think that some people would be convinced that this could be a Mercedes interior. The build is better, the materials are better, and most importantly for people in this segment, the tech is better. Hyundai Kia's Driver Assist suite is one of the best in the business, rivaling Tesla's Autopilot. It's their highway driving assist. It is fantastic. I tested it again in the mountains in Idaho through curvy roads, highways. It's all good at all speeds, and it's really impressive. So while the cabin on the Highlander is nice, it just doesn't quite keep up with the Palisade. And I mean, from a cockpit perspective, you've got your digital dash, you've got your touchscreen infotainment system, all the tech is here, all of your knobs, buttons, and switches are really nice and fun, are really tactile and nice to interact with. But every once in a while, you're going to need to put kids in the back. Now, by all accounts, it is pretty spacious in here. The front has a very short dash, it makes it feel very open, and the lighter interior makes it feel bigger and more airy. In the second row, you have adequate seating and space for a normal-sized human being, and you have plenty of outlets and chargers and amenities and things like that. However, if you're going to put adults in the second row, you're going to want those seats to pretty much go all the way back, which then makes the third row very cramped. The interesting thing here is that while most vehicles in their newer and more modern generations get bigger, longer, wider, and taller, this Highlander has actually shrunk a little bit, and you can tell that in the rear. So it's comfy and it works, but it leaves the door open a little for the Palisade. And this is where the Palisade capitalizes again. In the rear seats, you have similar amenities, chargers, temperature controls, all that sort of stuff. And Hyundai just takes it a step further. They add the high-grade materials, the piping, the quilting on the leather. It's incredibly nice back there. And most importantly of all, it's huge, especially with the second row captain's chairs. It's so easy to get into the rear. They fold from the sides super easily. And the third row is actually usable for human adults, which is arguably pretty rare in this segment. Well done, Palisade. Last thing to talk about would be exterior styling, and for some, this can be a make or break consideration for the vehicle. So the outgoing Highlander was a little bit more aggressive, it was a little bit more modern and jagged looking, and that's something that appeals to me. And the new fourth generation is a little bit softer, it's a little bit more friendly, it's a little bit less imposing, and to each your own. But in any case, I really like the accented wheels on this limited package, and I do like the deep red paint. Now, for me, the exterior design of the Palisade was always kind of the weak point of the car. The interior is fantastic, the tech is great, the comfort is good, the driving dynamics are shockingly good, but it wasn't always the best to look at. I do kind of like the different sort of style in the kind of waterfall LED running lights, but the most important thing here, especially in this calligraphy trim, is the little tiny attention to detail that they make with that little LED in between the upper running light and the lower unit. Now, again, another small but very important distinction for the calligraphy is the fact that it has these specific wheels on it. They are, in my opinion, fantastic, and wheels can make or break the look of your car. So for me, this suits the whole upscale, elegant sort of aesthetic that this Palisade really is going for and fills quite well. So now, for 2021, with this calligraphy trim, there's really not much to dislike, if anything, about the Palisade. Now let's jump outside for final thoughts. What it comes to, for me, is that the Palisade looks a little bit better, the interior is much better, and it's more fun to drive behind the wheel. However, with that being said, if fuel economy is an important thing for you at all, you should not feel bad considering the Highlander. It's the only hybrid in the segment, and it gets incredible fuel economy. So while for me, fuel economy is a little bit lower on my list, and the Palisade just does everything else a little bit better than the Highlander, I would go with the Palisade. However, like I said, Highlander's just a good enough choice as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Since it is cold and empty, no one's around to judge me. When you're gone, I said, I'm drowning in the Highlanders and Palisades.